We're diving deep today into an idea that, honestly, it challenges some fundamental assumptions we have about success, about sustainability, really about structure.
Mm.
We're looking at Chris R. Villasis's book, Holding the Rope Together, The Architecture of a God-Sized Movement.
It's a really crucial intervention, and I think you'll find it relevant whether you're involved in, faith-based work, nonprofits, or even just building a resilient team at your job.
Right.
Villasis takes this comprehensive look at missions, at global outreach.
Mm-hmm.
But his core argument is universal. It's
Right.
why do so many passionate, well-funded movements just stall or collapse?
And the answer he gives is, well, it's surprisingly technical. It's not a crisis of belief, not a shortage of heroes. It's a lack of sustainable architecture.
Exactly.
So for you listening, our mission today is to unpack that blueprint. We want to understand the structural failures that just completely undermine zeal and discover the design principles that allow movements to endure.
Right. Villasis points to this subtle but devastating internal crisis that's happening just beneath the surface.
And it's not the external stuff.
No, it's not political instability or lack of resources that breaks a movement. It's the internal fragmentation.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
What does that fragmentation actually look like on the ground?
Yeah.
Because from the outside, we see, amazing growth, incredible personal sacrifice.
You see a lot of activity, sure, but you also see a ton of silent collateral damage. You see exceptional people just running on fumes,
Wow, yeah.
missionary burnout, moral failure, really high rates of attrition. The momentum stalls because the whole system is designed around the charisma of one or two people, not the support of a whole community.
So what looks like a strategy failure is actually something else.
It's a systemic, structural, and this is critical, a theological failure.
The architecture itself is flawed.
Yeah.
And that brings us right to this distortion the book confronts, the false hierarchy. I think we can all recognize this. The person on the front lines, the visible one, gets elevated, and everyone else becomes, just support staff.
That's it exactly. The goer, the missionary, the activist, they get hero status. And that subtly but surely marginalizes the sender, the intercessor, the coach, the person providing the funds.
Right. When the goer's a hero, the sender's just a wallet.
Or the intercessor is just a volunteer. It's toxic because it reduces this deep, interdependent relationship to something transactional.
But the book completely reframes that. It repositions the whole thing, not as a race for a few specialists, but as a missional ecosystem.
A living, interdependent network. Every single role is essential and carries equal spiritual dignity. The key principle is shared obedience. The decision to stay and hold the rope is just as much an act of obedience as deciding to go down into the pit.
I find that so freeing. It puts everyone's contribution, no matter how quiet, right at the heart of the mission. And this leads us to the image that gives the book its name, the rope.
It's one of the most powerful images in the history of missions. It comes from William Carey back in the 18th century.
Father of modern missions.
Right. And when he felt called to this dangerous work in India, he issued a challenge to his friends back home.
Tell us the exact words again.
He said, "I will go down into the pit if you will hold the rope."
It defines the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
The person in the pit is vulnerable. Their survival depends entirely on the people above holding that rope.
So going and holding aren't separate things.
They're two parts of a single act of obedience.
Absolutely. The holding enables the going. When that rope is held tight through prayer, accountability, communication, the goer descends with confidence. They know if they stumble, the community will bear their weight.
But if the rope frays,
If people get distracted, if priorities shift, the one in the pit, they fall.
and Villasis really digs into the practical effects of that fragmentation. Beyond the obvious burnout, what's the deeper cost?
The main cost is a shift from, let's say, spiritual focus to material performance. Missionaries feel this intense pressure to constantly generate good news, impressive metrics, just to keep the funding lines open. So they stop abiding in their calling and start performing for their sponsors.
That sounds like a recipe for what the source calls number idolatry.
It is. We start measuring success by visibility. How good is the story? How high is attendance? It creates a culture where the hidden, patient, foundational work gets completely devalued.
And the book argues this isn't just inefficient,
It's unbiblical. The structure is supposed to reflect the truth you teach.
he goes beyond just Paul's body imagery in 1 Corinthians, right?
Yeah, he points to Jesus sending disciples out in pairs. That wasn't just for safety. It was a theological statement. Dependence isn't weakness. It's alignment with God's design.
Okay, so if fragmentation is the enemy, the solution has to be unity structure.
Mm-hmm.
But Villasis doesn't just ground this in, like, good organizational theory.
No, and here's where it gets really interesting. The architecture of a God-sized movement isn't based on management principles. It's rooted in the doctrine of the Trinity. The book says, mission is not merely something God does, it is something God is. The pattern is found in the relational life of God himself, Father, Son, and Spirit.
So because God's nature is relational, the church's structure has to reflect that. The persons of the Trinity don't operate independently.
Exactly. And this leads to this complex but essential theological concept called perichoresis.
Okay.
It's often translated as mutual indwelling. Think of it like a divine dance, each person making room for the others, mutually sustaining one another.
And Villasis argues that this divine dance is the model for our mission structure.
Yes, it elevates collaboration beyond just being a good idea. It makes it a theological necessity. Our interdependence becomes a form of, quote, worshipful participation in God's nature.
So when we operate in silos, seeking individual glory,
We're distorting the very nature of the God we claim to represent.
that is a powerful connection. How does he map the human roles back onto that Trinitarian idea?
It gives every role this incredible dignity. Senders who initiate and resource, they reflect the Father's sending love. Goers embody the Son's incarnational obedience.
Going where they're sent.
And the intercessors who sustain and empower, they align with the Spirit's sustaining presence. If you deprioritize any one of them, the image becomes unstable.
This structural alignment, then, it has to have practical implications for the local church. This is where the architecture really takes shape.
The implications are revolutionary. I mean, the traditional model often treats church as a spiritual destination, a place you go to consume spiritual goods.
Right.
Villasis says no. Churches were designed as distribution centers, places that form disciples, equip leaders, and multiply communities outward.
Which ties into that analogy he uses of the church as a greenhouse.
A greenhouse is all about cultivation, protection, and time. You don't just throw a seed out into the field, it needs to be nurtured.
So the church has to get really good at discipleship.
At deep discipleship, at letting leaders try and sometimes fail safely, and committing to their long-term growth before they're ever sent into the pit. A church's maturity is measured by who it releases, not what it holds on to.
That completely shifts the metrics of success away from things like budget size or attendance.
Precisely. The book points to the church in Antioch in Acts 13. Their maturity was proven when they released their best leaders, Barnabas and Saul. They sent them away. To hold the rope, the local church has to reclaim its identity as the engine of mission.
And inside that engine, we have to restore the dignity of these other roles. Let's talk more about what it means to be a faithful sender.
Senders are not just bookkeepers. They're not ATMs. The book calls for restoring their full dignity and responsibility.
Which is more than just fundraising.
Oh, much more. It's spiritual partnership. Deep accountability for the goer's health, physical, and mental. A good sender is an active partner, not just a distant provider who writes a check once a year.
And that long-term commitment means you need structures for care. Which brings us to the coaches and mentors.
This role is absolutely critical. He argues that missionary care counseling, trauma debriefing, spiritual direction, it has to be part of the core architecture, not an optional add-on for when a crisis hits.
Right.
We focus on the initial enthusiasm, but the long haul requires dedicated coaching to ensure resilience. Otherwise, it's just a sprint, not a marathon.
And I love how practical the book is here, calling out the expertise of marketplace professionals and retirees. This isn't just about money, is it?
Not at all. It's about leveraging human capital. Think about it. A goer might need legal counsel to set up an NGO or engineering expertise for a water project.
Sure.
The skills held by lawyers, accountants, tech developers, those are essential parts of the rope. They aren't secondary. They're the specialized expertise that makes the mission structurally sound.
So the expertise we value in the business world needs to be fully integrated.
Total integration. And for retirees, you have this incredible asset of time, wisdom, stability. They can hold that rope with a consistency that others might not have. It makes it a whole life, whole church undertaking.
All of this detailed structure, the senders, the coaches, it all points back to what Villasis calls the load-bearing wall.
Prayer.
Prayer.
And he is absolutely uncompromising here. Prayer is not preparation for the work. It is the work. Sustained communal prayer is the load-bearing wall and the engine of movement.
And if you neglect that wall,
the whole structure buckles. Without deep intercession, the mission shifts from participation in God's work to performance driven by human ambition. Prayer cultivates the humility needed for interdependence to actually function.
So if we're building this robust architecture, how do we know if it's working? If we're moving away from number idolatry, what are the new metrics? So what does this all mean for evaluation?
This is such a crucial section. He argues judging success by visibility alone just leads to fragile, short-lived efforts. We need new metrics that are focused on structural health and endurance.
Okay, so give us the framework.
It's 5 key areas. First, sending capacity. Can your church or movement release leaders and resources without collapsing itself? Second, resilience. Can the system handle a crisis without high burnout?
Makes sense.
Third is multiplication. Are you creating self-replicating communities or just growing the main hub?
And the last two get at that hidden work, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hidden fruit. Acknowledging the unseen work, the mentoring, the prayer, the relationship building that doesn't make for a flashy report. And finally, generational transfer. Is the system designed to outlast its founders, or does it all depend on their charisma?
Which makes the goal completely clear. Lasting fruit over rapid expansion. It means slowing down, having the patience to build structures that will sustain the work for decades.
It shifts the priority entirely,
Right.
away from zeal without structure and towards architecture before activity. We have to build slowly enough to ensure the structure actually reflects God's nature, trusting his pace over our own sense of urgency.
It's a call for repentance of fragmentation and a reconstruction of the entire ecosystem.
That's it.
This deep dive, it's really a profound call to move away from these isolated, individualistic efforts. It's an invitation to shift from doing more for God to building strategically with God.
And that shared obedience is what ensures endurance. It's an invitation for every one of you listening to find your specific, unique obedience within that shared community structure. The goal is no longer personal greatness, but being a faithful part of the whole.
And as we close, in a world that feels so isolated and fragmented, the book suggests the church's most powerful witness might not be how boldly it sends.
It gets all the headlines.
Right, but in how faithfully it holds the rope together, in its unity, its interdependence, its commitment to caring for the people in the pit.
That faithfulness in holding, that's the visible manifestation of paracresis in action.
A wonderful closing thought. We hope this deep dive into holding the rope together empowers you to see how your own contribution can shift from just individual activity to integrated, resilient participation. Thank you for guiding us through this today.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.